Welcome back to the Skids and Giggles podcast. I'm Pascal, chief instigator of this show and your host. I'm joined by my co-host and resident engineer, the Waldorf to my Statler, Bryson. Bryson, how's things going with you today?
I'm revved up, Pascal. How are you?
I'm going great, man. It's going great. Today we're also joined by our good buddy and external engineering consultant, Esteban Zimmermann. Yeti, how's things with you?
Great, guys. New bike day today. Just got my new Enduro like 2 weeks ago. My old one it wasn't old. My Enduro got stolen. So, yeah, I'm pretty stoked today. And happy to be with you. First time doing a podcast.
Nice one. Well, I guess before we do anything else, I think we should clarify why people have to come to call you Yeti as your nickname.
Well, if you've ever met me, you will know I'm not really small, and I would say I'm big bone, though I have my winter weight right now. I'm quite hairy. So there's a couple of versions to the story. I'll leave up most of them to the urban legends, but I think the main one came to be when I was wearing the old Dainese. Here they say Dainese.
Well, it is Italian.
Whatever. Dainese. Those awful full body protection suits that would stink like hell after a whole season. Well, I had one of those, and I was wearing it. And it was quite a foggy day in the mountains in Peru, so I just went far away to take a leak, maybe dump something more. But as I was coming back, there was this group of kids there, and this little girl just saw me coming out of the fog, and she started yelling, "Yeti, the Yeti's coming," and so on. They were quite afraid, and they ran away. So I guess that's sort of officialized the nickname.
Nice one. Okay, right on. Well, I think before we jump to our listener questions for today, it's time for some housekeeping and saying thank you to everyone that shared our show with friends, reached out to us with feedback, or just sent in some great follow-up questions. Please keep those coming. It really helps our show to be as relevant as possible. To follow along, you can find and subscribe to the Skids and Giggles podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and now even YouTube. Bryson, we are on the tube, man.
What?
I know.
Tubers.
It's crazy. Well, you guys have to excuse our gnarly YouTube address, but as you know, or may not know, we need at least 100 subscribers to our channel to get our own address. So if YouTube is where you listen to podcasts, then you can just subscribe to our channel and let us know that you're listening there. And in the same process, make it easier for everyone else to find us. If you just want to say hi or want to comment on anything, just slide into our DMs on Instagram at Skids and Giggles, or find us under skidsandgiggles.com, where you have all the other information. Well, with all of that out of the way, it's time for the listener question today, and I think we have a great one for Yeti. Bryson, do you want to take that one maybe today?
Yeah, thanks, Pascal. Yeti, welcome. I was chatting with a friend of mine after episode 2, where we had James on talking about some of the trends that he believes will be coming up in the next 5 to 10 years. And he made a good point. He said, all this talk about electronics, more better suspension and better suspension is great for guys who want to buy top shelf stuff, great for the pros, but he wants to know, what does it really mean for the average Joes?
Well, Bryson, I know you don't like more suspension. You like actually to go with less suspension. You always go under fork with it. But no, I think for the average Joe, I'm gonna use now the classical BS argument that I'm gonna say, it's the same as with Formula One. It's all trickle down technology to the consumer, and it's how it starts with the prosumer and so on. But actually, in the bike industry, I think it makes sense in the more like from the innovation side. if you remember when we were young, I don't know, you ever use cantilever brakes or V brakes? Remember
Definitely.
those?
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
even had brake boosters.
Yeah, I had those too, like the Gorilla brake boosters for the forks. Well, I used two of those. It still bended like hell. But anyway, I remember the time when they started introducing the disc brakes, hydraulic disc brakes. The first haze, they were crappy, but they actually brake better. So all the old guys back then used to say, "Yeah, why do we need disc brakes? I mean, the stuff we have already works." And the older guys used to say, "Why do we need suspension? The stuff we have already works." And I think it's the same. It goes in the same direction with electronic shifting. I think now the time is right because it's not actually a new idea. So it has also to do with timing and trickle down argument of technology will. I think that will happen eventually later. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's kind of the right innovation that the kind that opens a ton of options, not only for the consumer with new features and so on, but also for the frame builders. I mean, getting rid of all the cabling things actually makes your life much easier as a frame builder. So I think we could be on to some cool new features. And I mean, the timing is also right. Look at the seat post, the Magura Viron wireless seat post. That was crappy. Sorry, Magura, but it was really crappy. And I mean, now the AXS seat post, it just works. I mean, it still costs a lot of money, and I see myself as an early adopter. And even though I'm an engineer, I like, or people say I have a dentist bike. But yeah, I think that's one of the good things about living and working in Zurich. But I mean, I would be also happy with just riding Ixte or something.
Well, obviously I've ridden with you for the last couple of years, and I just wanted to know, if you can describe to the listener what it feels like when you. I mean, what is the retail price of an Axis derailleur? Exactly. So, how does it feel if your, let's say, winter weight body in a first trip abroad to a nice riding destinations smashes that beautiful derailleur into a rock and it's broken forever? How does that feel?
I have to say, the first few months I had IXS on my bike when I did the upgrade, I was quite paranoid because for anyone that doesn't know, I think suggested retail price on an IXS derailleur, what is it? Is 750 or something francs? I don't know. Something.
Too
Yeah,
many.
something
All the
along.
francs.
Yeah, all the francs. Like, yeah. I mean, compared to a normal derailleur, that's like 3 times the price, or even more, depending on what analog derailleurs you're getting. But yeah, I was quite paranoid the first couple of months. Luckily, nothing happened, but then eventually the day came where I broke one. I mean, it hurts, man. I mean, like it's. I know when I was younger and I would work and save all my pennies just to be able to upgrade to a mid-range fork or something that. And now I just throw all that money in just one derailleur. It puts things into perspective, but good thing is now I can afford it. I enjoy it. It's pretty cool. And as an engineer, I actually, after I've digested the whole destroying a 700 francs derailleur, I like taking it apart, looking into it, why it broke. And actually, I've already broken two AXS derailleurs, and they broke exactly the same way. So my inner nerd is actually hoping that I break a third one in exactly the same way, so I can go to SRAM with sort of a case, because I have a sort of a theory that this is a weak spot on their derailleurs.
Well, I
Yeah.
guess
What was
SRAM
the
should
question?
be. SRAM should be very happy with feedback like that.
Yeah. Also, I have to say, I have a great daily bike insurance, and I'm gonna mention them because I'm really thankful to them. Even though I can afford the derailleurs, I'm happy for them to take the over the bill. It's links.ch. They're a daily insurance for your bike, and they will just sort of pay you. Send them a screenshot of what you broke, and they will just pay. I mean, it's for like a super fancy dentist bike. The daily insurance costs like 7 francs. So if you know you're gonna send it that day with your mates and you're gonna do stupid stuff with your expensive bike, so it's worthwhile spending a couple of francs to insure it.
Oh, absolutely agree. Bryson, do you have something on that topic?
Yeah, Yeti, bring it back to the point about the trickle down technology. It's it's pretty well widely regarded, understood that this is taking place, and you can argue that it's already seen in the mountain bike industry as well. For example, with just damper technologies. So you have some premier damper technologies in suspension forks, the high-end suspension forks that have worked their way down into the mid-range and probably even the lower end in some brands.
Right now, I from what we've touched until now, it's like we are putting like the whole innovation of the bike industry into this high pedestal where, I mean, and not everything is that rosy. I mean, there is a lot of BS going into marketing and innovation that they're trying to sell us. So this I realize mostly from talking like to guys that are into motorsports, like rally suspension, motocross suspension. I mean, these guys have their stuff figured out since long time ago, and the stuff that some of the brands try to sell us is like it's just awful, and it's just renaming, damping or like new damping systems, like repackaging and everything. And I mean, some of that stuff actually works and makes sense, but then the normal consumer has no idea, and I mean, they just change bikes anyways every 2, 3, or 5 years. So they just buy the newest thing, and they're happy to have that new sticker with a new abbreviation on their fork or frame or whatever. So yeah, there's a lot of BS to go through it, and I think some of the skepticism that triggered that question from your friends might have to do with some of that, with all the stuff that all the marketing that's actually not real, no real innovation that they want to sell us.
Well, that's true, but I guess to maybe wrap this discussion up. I mean, it's if you want to summarize the discussion and maybe the thinking about this trickle down is, of course, if you're sitting here as an average Joe, as an average rider, then I think the key takeaway from all this innovation for you is that if you don't want to upgrade your bike and go with the newest trends, that would hopefully mean that at the very least the stuff that you currently ride is getting a lot cheaper to replace, for that it's the same quality that you have already now. And if you want to just stay, let's say, on the same price level, then if you always spend the same amount, then that means that the average quality of that same price point should get a lot better over time.
Absolutely.
So overall, I think it's the innovation. Yes, it's the same as we see in other markets. Formula One is obviously one of the the flag bearers in terms of innovation for the car industry, and similar in mountain biking. Obviously, it's downhill and enduro to some extent, and much less so actually cross country these days. That technology and innovation is coming down because we better understand the performance of these different components, and we understand how to make them cheaper and make them better and more robust.
Yeah, especially more robust. And I want to say one last thing about that is like, if you've only been riding and only been biking for the last maybe 3-5 years, you have no idea how lucky you are to be riding the bikes that we have today. I mean, the bikes that we have today are freaking amazing. I mean, they last super long. I mean, the stuff that you can do with an enduro bike that you can pedal up, and with the stuff that you can ride down, and it will just work. And I mean, 10 years ago, I wouldn't even dream of going one full week to Finale Liguria and not having to repair something. And now it's possible. So, and also people just say bikes have gotten so expensive and so on. But if you compare apples with apples, like an aluminum bike that is robust, has good suspension, good brakes, good wheels, and so on, those have actually gotten cheaper. If you compare like apples with apples, really, like 10 years ago, you would be paying $4,500-5,000, and now, like from one of the direct sale brands, you can get one of those for what, 2,500-3,000.
Yeah, but that's not comparing apples with apples. That's apples and pears. But if you go for,
Yeah,
let's say
but
the more value models of the big brands, then your analogy is correct, I think.
I would say that depends, because if like back then, like 10 years ago, you would have to take like the XTR. That would be the only group that would like stand a couple of months. And now that same group that can stand a couple of months, and I would argue that shifts more or less the same than an XTR from 10 years ago, for example, SRAM GX or Diore. Diore equipped Yeti, let's say, what is that, 3K? So
yeah. I guess on that positive note, I think it's time to close out that listener question. As we said earlier, keep those questions coming. We like to get into those and discuss the key takeaways. So now maybe to move into the main part of our conversation today and the topics we like to cover. I guess to start with, Yeti, maybe you can explain to us how does a Yeti that is growing up on the beaches of North Lima in Peru get into riding bikes? Was it because of all the hair?
I'm not going to ask you whether hair has something to do with that.
Well, have you seen a Yeti before?
I've seen myself in the mirror. No. How did I get into biking? That's the question, right?
That is correct.
That is correct. So how did I get into biking? Well, the place where I grew up, it's actually sort of north of Lima. Back then it was a bit detached, so you had like a big portion of desert between the big city that Lima is and this place where I grew up, Ancon. So it was pretty desolated. There was only like the beach, the yacht club, which was the reason why we lived there, because my father liked to sail. And our house was like on the top of the hill, so the only way to get down to the beach or any restaurant or to get ice cream or whatever was just by bike or walking, like, what was that, like 1 hour. So that's how I actually got into biking, like just to be able to go to the beach to see my friends. And then it developed, like, I guess, like with most of us, like the bike, just riding your bicycle equals freedom in some way. Like you can ride bigger distances, and just have time for yourself. It's gonna sounds funny, but just the feeling of the wind going at speeds and being able to reach those speeds, just being a kid, it's pretty awesome. So that's how I started biking, and then of course going down was more fun than riding up. Yeah.
Presumably, as you were growing up and carrying the frame that you're carrying now.
Yeah, I started breaking bikes back then already. But I mean, those were steel bikes, so we would just get them soldered up again. So it was funny. I crashed into a few cars. Even, yeah, my mom didn't like it that much. So anyway, I think that's the same with everyone when they start riding as kids. And yeah, and then when I moved into the city, I met some other people that share my interest into riding bikes downhill. And I realized this was becoming a sport and just started riding more and more and trying stupid things like drops and yeah, and just got like a GT cross country bike, went into a downhill race.
What year
Yeah,
was that?
dude, I think I was 13, 13, my first downhill
That
race.
must have been, what is that, mid 90s?
Yeah, I was riding. Yeah, that was a GTLTS 3,
Oh,
I
okay. So
think.
it was already with suspension. I was just wondering because it was like mid '90s. It was a cross country bike. My question would have been, how far down the track did you get before it broke into pieces? Because that was my experience at the time. But
I crashed like 100 meters before the finish line. And then I had one of my first, actually my first concussion. Yeah, I remember forgetting everything about that day and just waking up hours later or like half a day later in the hospital as I woke up in the MRI machine or a CT scan. I don't know which one was it. So just imagine you're just like teenager and wake up in one of those machines and you see the green laser pointing at your eyes. So I freaked out a bit.
It sounds
yeah.
really traumatic. But what kept you coming back to the bike?
I think mostly the people. I think people. I mean, biking is just this awesome common denominator, and it just unites people from whatever their background is. I mean, we had. I mean, we had people from motocross, old guys, young guys, people from cross country, and then I mean downhill was just starting to become downhill back then. So we had all these people from different backgrounds just coming in, and that was pretty cool. And I'm gonna say that at school I was quite a nerdy guy, so I didn't regard almost that many people at school as like close friends, and this is something my biking gave me, like this sense of community. Like if you crash, like all the people that come and pick you up and you have fun together, you do stupid things, dangerous things together, and this just sort of unites the troop that we became. And those are some of my best friends until now. Even living in Europe, when I see them, it's like we've been together all these years. So that's really pretty cool. And I mean, the cool thing, really really cool thing about biking is that age really doesn't matter. Like you can hang out at the table with riders that are 20 years younger than you, 20 years older than you, and at the end of the day, this common denominator, that's biking, and that's just awesome.
So you mentioned that you have some riding buddies in Switzerland. How would you compare the scene or even the riding between Peru and Switzerland? What are the differences? What are the similarities, maybe?
Well, the first thing that made an impact on me when I started riding here in Switzerland when I came is how organized everything felt with biking. You can really tell, like, well, at least back then, that was 2006. For those that didn't bike back then, there weren't many bikers back then. So all the bikers that you met riding, they had, at least here in Switzerland, they had some sort of like Verein background. They would,
Probably mostly racer types, right? So because that's that's a lot of where Swiss biking culture in that
yeah,
from the olden days, like from the 90s, right? Where it's coming from, and actually still of the infrastructure certainly on the competitive side is still based on
yeah.
those systems that were put in place back then.
Yeah, you could really tell that all the guys that you would met riding would be like had some sort of a very organized background regarding their riding, or at least on all the downhillers. They had most European downhillers back then. They had like a BMX background. So even though they tried to be like this free ride kind of cool guy from Cranked 5 or something, they still were like organized and very serious about their riding. So that's one of the difference. And the other difference is that I was shocked how difficult it is to build trails here in Switzerland, because in Peru you just go to a hill, don't ask anyone, just build something. If somebody says something, then you talk to them, and maybe you have to build somewhere else. But I mean, it's not, you don't have to get permits or anything. I think things have changed, but mainly in the city. But around Peru, outside of Peru, it's just like you have these endless hills, you have the Andes, and you can build. You don't really have to build trails, you just have to clear like parts of the hill so that you don't die. And then you just have these awesome descents that I'm sure you have seen on some of the YouTube videos or GoPro videos. But the other thing that shocked me is back then I had this idea of riding in Peru that if you there are certain trails in the Andes that where if you crash and break something, you're going to have a bad time, because you have to make it back to the car by yourself. You have to either, I mean, we have stories of guys breaking their femurs or breaking their hips and still having to ride like half an hour or 1 hour sitting in the back of a motocross bike going over rough terrain. So, I mean, that's painful. You survive, you may lose some blood, but you make it. And I think that's something you don't have here. I mean, here you just take your app, or someone sees you sort of dying and they call, and 15 minutes later you have a helicopter, and you have if you are lucky enough to be awake, and it's a nice day, you have an awesome view of the Alps.
Shout
Yeah.
out to the
Obviously,
Rega.
shout out to Rega, and
Yeah,
it's
Rega is
obviously
pretty awesome.
Thank you.
as a young family, or generally as someone that is regularly in the mountain, we obviously highly recommend becoming a member of Rega, which is the Swiss Alpine Rescue Service. Um, maybe to wrap up that that transition from Peru to Switzerland, and obviously particularly in Zurich. I mean, you've lived in Zurich now for quite some time, and maybe you can contrast the two. Like what sets Zurich apart from riding anywhere else for you?
Funny thing in Zurich is that a lot of people that ride in Zurich, they complain a lot about how shitty the official trails are here in Zurich. I'm gonna say I ride mostly with experienced riders. So these are guys that in their imagination they would prefer to have something like Porto Soler or Finale here in Zurich. But I mean, being realistic, living in a city that has this kind of job opportunities, these kind of universities, the kind of quality of life that you can have here with the lake and how close you are to the mountains and everything. Having the kind of trails that we have here, it's pretty awesome. I mean, there's a lot of work going into being able to get these trails. but still the trails that we have are really, really cool. I mean, maybe they're not Squamish level. Of course, we're far away from that, but that's comparing like, I mean, if you compare like the full package, I think I would keep Zurich just for the job opportunities that you have here.
I guess, yeah. I mean, exactly, right? So it's kind of that I think that's what most people forget. And obviously, I'm personally not here from Zurich, so I've only lived here for the last couple of years. But what is so interesting about living here is that yes, you have these opportunities on your doorstep. You can have a decent ride on your mountain bike. I mean, you can do certainly around where we live, you can spend 2-3 hours on the bike without having to do the same trail twice. And maybe yes, sometimes you're not riding on official bike trails, maybe a hiking trail or something else, but generally you're having a good time. And if you want to spend like a big epic day in the mountains, then just jump in a car, jump on a train, hook up with some friends and then drive it to the mountains, and you're in the mountains in in an hour or 2 hours you're in the high alpine areas where you can ride to your heart's content.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's necessary to have these crazy trail infrastructure necessarily in the city within city limits. But of course, everyone would love it if there's more and better and more challenging trails. But I think there's a fine balance that trail associations and the city and the landowners need to strike, which is to provide the opportunities for everyone and be inclusive and be having challenging trails for beginners, but also have something that's appropriate for intermediate to advanced riders. I think, which is what is currently being addressed.
Yeah, and I think you touch a very good point there, because back then when I say back then, I say like maybe 10 years ago, most people that were riding were actually already quite advanced riders, like people that started riding with quite the technical trails, and they really saw this as their main sport, so they really wanted to be good at it. But now we have I'm gonna say more like the weekend warrior type of rider, or the kind of rider that goes for an after work ride, not mainly for the riding, but also just for the fitness side of the sport. So then you have to start addressing these kind of issues that you have to make, because it's in city infrastructure that you're riding. You have to address the points of safety, and because of the how dense the city is here, how much people you have using the few spaces, natural spaces that we have. You have to address all these issues, like you have, use your resources in a wise way. But yeah, I think it's also very good that we aspire to have Squamish level of trails. I don't think that will be sort of possible here, because we don't have the space. Yeah, but it's a good aspiration.
Are you involved in the local digging community at all, or like in the local trail communities and all these institutions that look after the infrastructure?
Indirectly, because I don't like the politics of it, or in other words, I think I would. It's difficult for me not to tell it straight in the face of people, like if I don't respect their position regarding the politics of building trails here in Zurich, and there are some points that I don't agree on, but I really respect that they take their own personal time and they invest it into a common goal, that is having cool trails. Like I said, I don't agree with sometimes with how they do it, but I respect it a lot, and it's a common goal that we have to make biking cool as we understand the sport. And I try to help not directly and very openly, but more behind the scenes. I like trying to convince people that bikers are not that evil. For example, I was talking a lot with some senior groups of citizens that really love nature here. So in their idea of a perfect world would be have the woods and our Uetliberg here just empty of people and empty of any human-made, man-made infrastructure. But that's just not the case. And I actually quite enjoy the process of presenting them my view of the sport and what it meant to me. And think like finding a common ground that just we don't ride because it's an extreme sport. We don't ride because we want to hit that huge jump or something. We ride because sometimes it's just a way of connecting with yourself and connecting with people and with nature. And I think there I found some common grounds with these senior citizens, and they respected that. And they actually realized, okay, actually, the biking guys that we are hating on are not the majority, are not the trail builders, and are not the core of this group. It's more like the I would say that the new kind of rider that doesn't know the sport and doesn't respect it that much. So yeah, I was pretty happy with how this turned out, and yeah, they were enlightened, and I understood their point a bit better too.
I guess you make a good point. I mean, it's most of the time a lot of these conflicts can be avoided by taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture and putting yourself in the other person's shoes and trying to understand what this person wants to do and what this person tries to achieve. And I guess you mentioned an interesting topic, I think, which is a discussion for another podcast entirely, and that's this outside view, this outside in view of mountain biking, right? Which is people see on TV that people are throwing themselves off cliffs, and they see the rampage stuff, and they see Downhill World Cup on TV, and all these crazy stunts, and then they have the view that everyone is like that, right? So everyone wants to throw themselves over big jumps and big drops and do crazy things. But I would say for 99% of the riders out there, that's definitely not the case.
The thing is that, like you said, most of riders cannot even do that, and if you ride often, most of the times the reason that you're riding is just to clear your head and just have time for yourself and get into this flow state. And of course, to learn something new, you have to go on the edge of this flow state and get a bit scary and do scary things sometimes. But most of the times you don't do that, even if you can. I mean, I'm sure Brandon Semenuk is not riding. He's only riding on the edge of his skill set, like a fraction of the time.
When the camera is rolling.
When he's getting paid.
Yeah, so Yeti, it sounds like you're doing a lot of behind-the-scenes work, and I think I speak for everyone when we can say thank you for that, because I think it does go a long way. But I also know that you do some work on the front lines as well. I hear you're a legendary guide or a bike instructor.
Yeah. Oh, that's the front line. Yeah, it's sure. Yeah, I was going to mention the what you call now the front line because I think, officially what I do is I did this official certification as a mountain bike guide by Swiss Cycling. Hugely expensive certification, totally overpriced. No, just kidding. It's expensive, but not overpriced.
Well, it is Switzerland. It's reassuringly expensive.
Yeah. No, shout out to Dave Spielmann. He's like the big kahuna from the Swiss Cycling Guiding School. And Lucas Keller, those guys are awesome. It did cost a lot, but I learned in those, it was almost one full week, if not a bit more, including the one exam. But I did learn more in those days in guiding school than I've learned in all those corporate leadership programs that I have been going the last few years for work. So, like, learning to guide a group of people, make them have fun, keeping them safe, and getting them safe to their destination with a smile in their face, that is not an easy task. It requires a lot of planning, and it's one of those jobs that if you do it right, nobody notices that you've done it right. But if you mess it up without using the F word, but I mean, it ends up badly, and all the fingers are pointing at you. So I learned a lot in there. I had some of the most awesome riding I've ever had. I mean, in the end, if you do it right, these people, the paying customers, become sort of your friends. I still have contact with some of them, and did some back guiding with Dave Spielmann. Dave Spielmann, he's, like I said, the big kahuna of the big boss from the Swiss Cycling Bike Guiding School, but he also offers his own thing, and he offers very premium packages to people coming from abroad. So these are people that actually prepare quite a long time to be riding a full week with him in a sort of a Trans-Alps trip. And I was lucky enough to be able to help Dave guide some of these days. And it was pretty awesome just to see this, like see the real stoke at the end of one full day with these people. That was awesome. That was really, really cool.
What was, just you talked about it was some of the best riding you did during your guiding school. I mean, I always imagined that, for someone that has been riding for, decades, in your case, that, obviously you're set in your ways in terms of how you do your things and how you ride and how you approach stuff. And, what were the key challenges to get through that course? What did you have to change?
You have to ride completely different when you're guiding. Like, you have to ride 100% safe within your limits. You have to know you're not gonna crash. You have to keep an eye on everyone else. You have to be able to learn to read the people. You have to really, really read the people. Like, you have to observe their bike, the way they move around their bikes, the way they're dressed, the way they're equipped, the way they get on their bike, the way they brake, and everything. With these, just form a mental picture of how they ride, what their skill set is, and how, based on the route that you're going to be riding that day, based on your observations, you have to assess the risk that's going to be to guide them. So if it's a small group, you can guide from the front or from the back, but you have to, with this full mental picture of what is ahead of you and the kind of people that you have to change your language, the way you describe the trail to these guys that they've never ridden, but you wanted to describe it to them in such a way that they can ride it safely and have fun, not go too slow, and also not go as fast that they can crash. So it's a tricky balance. And yeah, you mainly have to, when you're riding in front, you have to take the safe lines. You have to imagine what their skill set is. Like if you saw that they cannot really turn their hips or put weight on their outside pedal, you have to ride lines that you know they will be able to keep traction and flow throughout that corner with their technique. So it's all about learning to read people's riding, and that's quite interesting. And I was lucky enough that I had been sort of practicing with my girlfriend already without knowing for some years. Because for me personally, it was very important that my partner would also ride with me and that I could share with her what riding means to me. I don't want her riding with me all the time, like not as badly as James said. He's happy to be alone.
He
No,
he, uh, he likes his alone time.
yeah, I love my alone time too. But having said that, I also like when I want my well, I need for my relationship to work, I need my partner to understand what biking means to me. And I can, for myself, I can only do that if I show her on the trail what that means to me. And I'm lucky enough that she got pretty stoked on it. So she wanted to ride better, improve her riding, and so on. So all these years, I've been riding like the tricky sections that I knew she would be right on the edge of what she could do at the time. I would ride it in front of her, and I would pick lines that I knew she would be able to ride with her current skill set. And we kept doing that all the time throughout all of our trips around. Well, we've been to many places by now, but yeah, and that kept her going, and she was pretty stoked. And I learned many valuable lessons with her that I can now transfer to my bike guiding and also when I do
We're
more
uh, we're,
technical
we're
training.
we're starting to go onto a very very interesting tangent here, and obviously, as I mentioned, I think in a couple of episodes now, is that one of the things I want to achieve with this podcast is to educate myself how I can get my better half to get out riding with me some more. So I want to explore this topic a little bit more. I mean, you mentioned that you had to adapt your communication style. You had to, almost break down how you make decisions out on the trail. Can you describe a little bit how, what is that process? How do you go about breaking it down for someone that is not such an experienced rider as you are? Because I've had the situation many times in the past. For example, not necessarily only with my better half, but also with other riders, right? That were asking for some tips, and asked me to look at their riding and then maybe comment on something that could improve. And I would just say an off the cuff remark and say like, "Oh yeah, just put more weight on your front wheel and you'll be right." And then obviously nothing changed, and because they cannot rationalize what it means to actually put more weight on your front. And then the funny thing is that is a good friend of mine who then later on went to our common friend Greg to the bike school to book a technique session for a day. And I knew about this, and then in the evening I called him up and was like, "Hey, tell me, how did it go?" And he was like, "Well, it was great. It was great. But what we did all day is we talked about getting more weight on the front. And now, after a day of Greg talking to me in simple steps and breaking it down, I finally understand what you meant with this 5-second remark about, yeah, just put more weight on your front. No problem." So to make this a short question, again, is like, how do you go about breaking it down for someone that's a less experienced rider?
I think first you have to understand the person. it's not. I mean, of course, you have to know how to ride. You have to know the body mechanics of what you have to do to ride well. But I think to teach riding to someone, you have to understand first what the background of the person is. Uh, with this is also the reason why it's much easier to teach something new or to teach riding to someone that's pretty young, because I think their mind is just so much more flexible. And with older people, and I mean by older, I mean already by if you're like 20 years old, it's gonna become trickier and trickier because your mind has already learned so many things, and you have all these mental tools and feelings on how you should move and how you should interpret the force feedback that you feel on your body. Uh, that's different for each person. So, I mean, like a good example, I had somebody that had a skiing background that just had just started riding, and there skiing is just like people that ski is just so easy to teach cornering, because you just teach them, like you show them the edge of the tire and you say them that's the edge of your ski. So you have to put the weight in a similar way. And actually, some years ago, my partner Daniela made me go take some skiing lessons, and it was a complete different on the opposite way. Like the guy that was teaching me how to ski, he also runs he runs Epic bike and skiing school in Lenzerheide. He realized I didn't know shit about skiing. So he told me, okay, dude, you have to do it like, just feel like you're putting pressure on the outside pedal, or you feel like you're going to corner like this or like that. So he translated everything to the toolbox that I had in my head. So that, I think, is the key, is being able to read the toolbox that people already have in their heads and explain them biking in those terms. Because if you tried explaining to someone, yeah, you just have to lose the brakes and put more weight on the front, I mean, they understand it. Of course, they're not stupid, hopefully. Uh, but if they have already this, if they're football players or something, like they have no idea how it feels, how it should translate to their body position, to the feedback they're gonna get from the bike. So I think it's hard work, but it's worth it to try to first understand what tools you have in their minds to start working on, and then build from there.
Okay. Well, I guess that's a good takeaway, and I should take that up the next time. One another interesting angle to this, all bike guiding and group dynamics I'm interested in is of course the whole discussion about mixed groups, so men and women versus women groups, and if there's any differences. Or what are the key standouts in those groups?
Oh, there are huge differences. Personally, I'd much rather take a women's group or than I think the trickiest one, not gonna say the worst one, but the trickiest one is a mixed group, then a men's group, and the easiest one is by far only women's group. And the reason is saying that at least when you have beginners courses, you lots of people, especially men, have this idea of biking being an extreme sport. So they want to go into going fast, going over rough trails, just like really sending it just as soon as possible. And then you have this competitiveness, this alpha competitiveness between men that's just stupid, and you really have to work as a guide or as a coach to work on slowing things down when you have a big group of guys. I mean, I'm generalizing a lot right now, but it's not unusual to have a lot of that in a group of men. And when it's mixed, you have the female factor in there. So they want to show off. Not all of them. I mean, some of them are very normal people, but when you mix like a bike with which you can go fast and show off with some jumps and so on, and you have people that want to learn to that, and they see a female there, they want to show off. It's just so, but that can end up badly. And the funny thing is, when you have only women, they are incredibly supportive of each other. Like they will. It's insane how motivational they are between them. So that makes like when you most of the, I'm also generalizing. There is also some difficult situations between women. I mean, as it is with all people, but most of the times they motivate each other much more. So the level of stoke it's much higher with a group of women. Yeah.
Okay, Bryson, do you have something on that discussion? I mean, you are a certified coach yourself. I'm sure you have something to say. See you itching.
I agree on all accounts with Yeti here. He makes a lot of good points.
Thank you, Bryson.
My mom also loves to bike, but she also loves to golf. Is mountain biking the new golf?
Oh, is mountain biking the new golf? I don't know what. I've never played golf, so I wouldn't know if. I read one article some years ago that road biking was a new golf, and they were mostly talking about like the whole networking thing and so on. And I think that takes over one of the aspects I was talking about, like how biking can become this common denominator to so many people of so many different backgrounds. Like you could be riding with someone that's CEO of some fancy company here in Zurich without knowing that they are in this power position. And I think that's what I like about biking from the point of view that it just makes sort of everyone equal. Like you just want to go riding and shred with mates. But then I can also see the point that some people that are very career oriented and they play golf mainly to network, that they want to take advantage of this fact. So at least in road biking, I've seen it sort of happen. I mean, with the guys I go road biking, you're not able to breathe when you're riding with them because they're pushing so many watts per kilos. That's my weakness. So I'm not able to tag. So I'm not able to network while I'm road biking.
But there are business deals being made over mountain passes in the Alps on bicycles.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's for us at work. That's a thing. I mean, that's be it from client events to charity events to even internal. On a bank holiday afternoon, or if it's a bank holiday, let's say in New York, and the London traders, they have a free afternoon, so to speak. So they all go out for the old London to Brighton ride, and then you have a couple of beers down at the beach, and then take the train back. I mean, that is a thing.
I can see that happen.
I think the only point I wanted to make on this, what I personally find beautiful, is that and you alluded to that earlier with that you could be riding with the CEO and or some other powerful or person in a powerful position, but the beautiful thing is that the road doesn't care.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so yeah, he's gonna be breathing through his eyeballs exactly the same way as you are. And but yeah, of course, there is obviously the alpha dynamic that is playing out there as much as it is in any other competitive endeavor of any sort.
Yeah, and going back to my access, I mean, the trail also doesn't care if I have access or your analog XCR, right?
Well,
You can have
as you found out, that big rock that kissed your ex's derailleur didn't really care how much it cost.
no, and
Not at all.
that's the beauty of the sport. I mean, you can have a kid riding a shitty bike just kill you on the trail, but I mean, if everybody shares the stoke, then it's cool, right?
Very true. So maybe last one to close out this topic. When you have guests that come in from abroad, where do you take them in Switzerland to show off the best riding that we have to offer?
I'm gonna have to say the only times I had international guests going to the Alps, it wasn't organized by me. So because that really requires you to dedicate a full-time job to this.
Where would you take them?
Where would I take them? Okay, so I would say Graubünden. Like you have everything is like a postcard there. You have the infrastructure, you have the trails. It's close to Zurich, to an international airport, so that's pretty easy. You have all sort of trails, so you have like a plan A, B, and C. If you have very good riders, you can take them to very tricky, sweet trails. If you have a mixed group, you always have more than one trail going to the same place. So you have a lot of options to take. You have friendly people, and you have sort of like the essence of what people outside of Switzerland think Switzerland is, right? And we sometimes forget about it when you've been living and riding here for such a long time. But just like riding the train and just looking outside the window, I mean, some people dream of that, of experiencing that view once in their lifetime. So, yeah.
Fully agree. Fully agree.
I have a follow-up question. What would you recommend that they eat at lunch on your tour in Graubünden?
Oh, Rösti.
Rösti.
Yeah. What's the name? Oh, you have to help me, Pascal. You're almost a local there in Davos. There is this hut.
All right. Well, our friend Yeti here, he had a little blank, but a couple minutes after the show, he remembered the name of this fantastic restaurant. Yeti?
Yeah, man, I'm getting old. But anyway, I remembered, and I was talking about Berghaus Staffelalp. It's this tiny hut at the end of some trails in Davos, and it has these amazing views over the valley. They have this great food and also especially great people taking care of you. And if you have any special wishes, I think you can still call them up. And there's even the possibility to stay for the night there. So it's all in all a great package. You can end the day there and start your day there, because there is also a trail down the hill from if you start your day there.
And with that, back to the show. All right, we're kind of getting towards the end of our time here, so we have 3 questions that we like to use to close out the show, and we ask those all of our guests. And the first one is pretty straightforward. I mean, we covered a lot of it already, and just wanted to know if you could tell us a little bit about the bike that got you stoked on riding, or generally the bike that got you stoked on being able to be out there.
That's a good question. What bikes stay with me? I think it's been a bunch of bikes, and I'm not gonna. It's like I would say it's like maybe four bikes that I could tell you everything about them. But what differentiated them is and what's have and the reason why they have this special place in my heart or my mind is the experiences that I was able to have because of those bikes. It's not because they were fancy, and it's not because they were had AXS or anything like that, but it's just because the it was the bike that I had at the time when I was riding with certain people in a certain place.
You have to name if you have to name one. Which one is it?
That GTL TS3 I mentioned before, my first proper full suspension bike.
It is a pretty sweet bike, I must admit, because I did have one of those as well. I actually had the version number 2, so LTS2.
Oh, fancy.
I guess the key difference between those two models is that it was a question of time which one would fail first, either the elastomer that would collapse on the ride, or the coil shock that was installed on mine was starting to leak. So we were struggling with the same with similar issues on the same bike.
I also broke the chainstays.
I have to post a photo of a tachoed rear wheel on my LTS from way back. I found that the other day at my parents'. Great bike, great memories for me as well, and obviously a fantastic time in this sport to think back to.
Yeah.
Second one. Imagine you are Harry Skidini, the bike magician extraordinaire. You can make riding a bike more awesome for anyone by the stroke of your magic dropper post. What skill would you, magic onto someone, or which common mistake would you, take away from anyone or from everyone to make riding a bike more awesome?
Oh, this is a tricky one, but I think the easiest fix for everyone would be to look ahead more. I think that solves a lot of your problems. And I mean, if you're too far back or too far front, or you have a weird position on your bike, most of that gets solved, or at least is enabled to be solved by just looking ahead more. That just gives people more time to think, to see what's coming. They just feel more relaxed, and they have, especially when they're learning or when they want to correct something, you need a lot of mental think power, processing power. So looking ahead helps with that. Even for us experienced riders, the further ahead you look, the better you ride.
Okay, Yeti, you're 2 for 2, but here comes the clutch, the third question.
Oh.
All right, drum roll. In your personal opinion, now I want you to think real deep. Just get into your flow zone.
How deep do you want it?
So deep.
All the deep.
All the deeps. Okay.
What makes a great skid?
What makes a great skid? Being a heavy guy, I think that, no, it doesn't matter. The weight doesn't matter. But that if you would film a skidding in slow motion, and the latest slow-mo that I saw that pictured this was the bike check of Jack Moore. When you see him skidding and you see the rear wheel just flexing, like check, and you get to that point of like on the edge of control, you feel your bike like also like sort of on the edge. I mean, for me being so heavy, it's quite easy to get to like a real will to flex. You don't need that much skill with my weight to make it do that. But it just feels awesome just to feel like the bike just like this, do this flexing vibration in the rear and just losing and being on the edge of losing and gaining traction again, and especially feeling that you are sort of on control, or at least believing you're in control of that.
Back in control.
Yeah, that's I think that feeling that makes a perfect skid for me.
Ding.
That's ding. That is great. Thank you very much, Yeti. I think that brings us to the end of our show. Just to close out, where can listeners find out more about the Yeti on a bike, and if they want to book their next trip with you, where can they find you?
I tried doing my own social media platform, but I failed pretty badly at it. So I would just say contact me on Instagram on my private account, YetiDH, I think. I don't even know my own Insta tag.
Those are the real professionals.
Yeah, exactly. And or on Strava, you can look me up by my real name, Esteban Zimmermann, I think. I don't know if you can direct message on Strava. I suck at this. I think not.
I'm sure people will find you.
Exactly. And on the official channel, you can just go to bikeschuleZürich.ch or through the biroma.ch website. That's the bike shop that supports us and one of the coolest bike shop here in town. And you can contact me through them, and they also have a lot of pretty cool coaches and guides there.
For any need.
For any
All
need.
Right. Well, that's awesome. Well, Esteban, thank you very much for your time. It was awesome having you on. Bryson, it was a pleasure with you as
Likewise.
always.
Cool, guys.
And with that, I think we close it out. Talk to you
Thanks,
next
Yeti.
time.
Cheers.
Ciao.